History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of Oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 550th episode of the History Goes Bump podcast.
Wait. 550th? That's a big milestone.
Well, yeah, I guess it's 50 more than the 500.
I just wanted to point that out. You have created such an incredible podcast and have been doing it for so long. And look at all that back archive that we have to share with everyone.
Wow. Well, thanks, Kelly. And shall I introduce myself?
I suppose so.
I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Did I say ghost tours for the Theater of the Mind?
I don't think you did.
Ghost tours for the Theater of the Mind. I'm your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we're going to be talking about the Bellaire Demon House. I had to throw that demon in there because that's the way this house is really described. The activity going on here is very demonic. So it reminds me a lot of the Conjuring house. And that's how we're going to kind of come at it, because getting to the root of the history here is very difficult. And some of the things that have happened here are so outlandish, they're hard to believe for people who are open-minded skeptics like us. So we have a lot of interesting stuff to share with you in just a moment. Before we get into that, we want to welcome into the Spooktacular crew Teddy with just an I at the end, Debbie with an IE, Stephanie with an IE, and Brandy with an IE.
We've got a trend going here. Thank you for joining the Spooktacular crew.
And now, this moment in Oddity.
The moment in Oddity was suggested by Michael Rogers. During World War I, there was a most unique form of ambulance utilized by the British, French, and Americans. During the war, smaller and lighter ambulances were needed during the heat of battles. Four-wheeled versions of ambulances were large, heavy, bumpy, and prone to getting stuck on uneven and muddy terrain. It was determined that motorcycles using a sidecar for the injured was the most conducive option to supply the need. Prior to the war, one of the first motorcycle sidecar ambulances was used on Redondo Beach in California back in 1915. They were found to be very efficient for getting drowning victims across the sand to transport to local medical facilities. Even an animal hospital in London used this style of ambulance for transporting animals as early as 1912. However, motorcycle ambulances really became widely used due to the war. Although there were various suppliers during World War I, the Indian Motorcycle Company was the most widely used contractor, followed by Harley-Davidson. These motorcycles had reliable motors and were lightweight. Of course, the motorcycle ambulances did not offer a very smooth ride, but it was determined that their ability to get injured soldiers to medical care so quickly really increased the rate of survival for victims. Some of the sidecar ambulances had double-decker stretchers attached, while others looked a little more similar to traditional sidecars. Our favorite photo is of a motorcycle ambulance whose sidecar looks very much like a coffin. However, I would imagine taking a ride in that one would be most disconcerting, although it did look like the most safe option. One thing we are sure of, riding in a motorcycle sidecar ambulance must have been odd.
Are you afraid of the dark?
And now, this month in history.
In the month of August, on the 6th, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed into law by Lyndon B. Johnson. This piece of federal legislation was established to prevent racial discrimination in the voting process. The act was intended to reinforce the voting rights already protected by the 14th and 15th Amendments of the Constitution. There are many provisions listed in the act. Section 2 prohibits state and local governments from denying the right of any citizen to vote based on their race or color. Another section mandates that jurisdictions containing large populations of people who speak a different language be provided with bilingual ballots and other election materials. Section 5 disallows any jurisdiction from implementing changes that affect voting without acquiring approval from the U.S. Attorney General or the U.S. District Court for D.C. to ensure the changes do not affect protected minorities. It has been stated by the U.S. Department of Justice that the Voting Rights Act is thought to be the most efficacious piece of civil rights legislation ever administered in the United States.
The Bellaire House has a big reputation and is located in southeastern Ohio in the city for which it is named. The Heatherington family built the house, lived here, and died here, and are said to haunt it now. But this isn't just the Bellaire Haunted House. People refer to this, as Diane said, as the Bellaire Demon House.
Ooh.
Mine was better. We're a little off the rails today, folks. I don't know what's going on, but strap in.
I finally feel better after almost 4 weeks of kidney pain and bladder issues and all kinds of stuff. So
we're a little giddy. The house is said to be plagued with lots of ghostly and demonic activity. Possibly because it sits on a ley line, or maybe because a coal mine blew up, killing nearly 42 men. Or maybe somebody just opened a bunch of portals. Join us for the history and hauntings of the Bellaire Demon House.
Mound builders were the first to live in the area of Bellaire, Ohio, and they were followed by the Shawnee, Delaware, and Mingo. Two men named John Rodifer and Jacob Davis purchased several acres of land to set up a village in 1834, and they named it Bell and then Air, so it's two words the way they had it. This was after Davis's former home in Maryland. Captain John Fink started early mining operations in Bellaire. Eureka! They found coal here, so they got all kinds of mining going. A man named John Heatherington immigrated to Bellaire from England in 1829, and he was soon followed by his 4 sons, John Jr., Jacob, Ralph, and Edward. They worked a mine in the hills south of McMahon's Creek, and the local farmers really complained about it because it was a very loud process. Now, I always had heard that farmers get up early, like at the crack of dawn. Usually roosters go off at about 4 a.m., right?
Right.
These farmers are complaining because they're losing their morning sleep. You're waking me up too early with your mining operations. I didn't get it. I was like, shouldn't you guys be in the fields anyway?
Early to bed, early to rise. Come on now.
Well, here's the thing. The farmers realized it was bringing in money and people, so they decided losing their morning sleep wasn't so bad after all. We got somebody to sell our crops to. The Heatherington family were not only good at mining, they were musically inclined as well. After a long day in the mines, they would bring out their clarinet, drum, fife, and other instruments and play folk songs.
How fun.
Yeah. As we said, John had a son named Jacob. Jake had been born in England in 1814 and immigrated to Ohio to join his parents in 1830. In 1837, Jake rented a coal bank from Captain John Fink after buying 8 acres of land on credit. He would build his fortune on this start, and despite not really being able to read or write, he eventually owned nearly all of the coal mines in the Ohio Valley and grew his 8 acres of land to 800 acres.
Holy cow.
So kids in school, when your teachers say you can't read or write, that's overrated. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
It.
But it's amazing what he was able to do.
Jake had a mule he named Jack that helped him build his coal mining business. The two worked the initial coal bank by themselves, and a great affection grew between man and mule. Jacob built his mansion in 1847 with the help of Jack. This point in history was famously commemorated in the nursery rhyme, "This is the house that Jack built."
Isn't this fun?
It is fun. I had no idea.
I had no idea what the story was behind this rhyme.
This is a rhyme that starts with one verse, that adds a verse, and continues to build up over 11 refrains, with this being the final stanza. This is the farmer sowing his corn that kept the cock that crowed in the morn, that waked the priest all shaven and shorn, that married the man all tattered and torn, that kissed the maiden all forlorn, that milked the cow with the crumpled horn, that tossed the dog, that worried the cat, that killed the rat, that ate the malt, that lay in the house that Jack built.
You did great with that, Kelly.
I kind of learned it when I was young. It's been around for a while.
Yeah, so I'm sure that, I don't know if they still do these kind of nursery rhymes for some of our younger listeners, but I know our older ones definitely remember saying that one when they were in school. And I never had any idea that it was talking about a mule that helped this guy build his house. Like, it was a real story.
Yeah, I had no idea either. I can recite pretty much the whole book of Goodnight Moon.
Was that based on a real story, Kelly?
No. It is said that Jacob led Jack the mule through the house after it was done to show him what it was like. We're not sure what the house looked like when originally built, but today the house is surrounded by a wraparound porch. The first floor has a foyer with piano, living room, kitchen, bathroom, and a large room that has been nicknamed the Seance Room. Upstairs there is the Emily Davis Room, Edwin Heatherington Room, bathroom, old study leading up to the attic, and the altar room.
Well, we'll find out why they have these interesting names to go with them. Of course, they weren't named that to begin with. The house was said to have been built over one of Jacob's mines, coal mine number 1, that had exploded and caught fire and been abandoned. Now, I don't know if this is the one that exploded that led to 42 deaths. I could not find any stories on that.
Huh.
The closest I could get was this other coal mine that blew up in the 1940s where there were like 70 people who died. So I don't know if this was not reported in any of the papers or what have you, but supposedly, I mean, finding a good history on the house and the family works about as well as finding a good history on the Conjuring house, as I said earlier. There's a lot of conjecture, a lot of made up stuff, I think, not a lot of fact. And that's the problem with these locations. Lots of legends and mystical stuff, but not many verifiable facts, which makes it hard for us to even get to the root of hauntings and trying to understand what is going on. And that's what we like around here, facts. It was said that this house was built on a ley line near some sacred Shawnee Native American burial caves. I don't know if why we have some activity going on here is because we've got this ley line, then you've got Indian burial grounds, and who the hell builds their house over, hey, my mine blew up, I think I'll put a house over it?
I mean, that does seem a little odd.
Especially when it said that it had caught fire, and the little bit that I could find about something to do with that, it was like the fire just kept burning, which makes me think of Centralia, which is still burning today. There's no way you're building a house over that because they abandoned the entire town because that fire's still burning. So,
correct.
I don't know if this was really built over a mine. I just put that out there to go with what they say about it. Now, we couldn't find a marriage date, but Jacob eventually married a woman named Eliza Armstrong, who was said to be a beautiful young woman. And here we go with a legend. Legend claims that she saw a falling star one day and decided to find out where it had fallen, as if you could actually find where it's falling. I've seen plenty of falling stars in my time, and I would have no idea where that star went. But anyway, somehow this led her to Bellaire, where she found Jacob. Now, another story claims that she came to Bellaire and worked in a bar, and that's how she met Jacob. I'm thinking that's probably more accurate. Whatever the case, the couple married and had 10 children, with 8 of them surviving to adulthood. The Heatheringtons and the Davis family, who were the co-founders of Bellaire, as we'd mentioned earlier, were abolitionists, and they worked together with a local reverend to help runaway slaves. So it's thought that there could be tunnels that are on this land to facilitate runaway slaves. Maybe they had some runaway slaves come into their home. Not sure. We don't have any facts on that either. Jacob lived to be 90 and died in 1904. Eliza had died before him in 1896. A beautiful sculpted monument was placed over her grave featuring a woman seated holding a book, looking down. And Jacob said he commissioned this because people had always looked down on her, so now she could look down on them, basically.
Oh.
And that's what makes me think that the story of her working in the bar was probably the true story, because
sure, people
would see her of this elevated status because she's married this very successful rich man in town, but hey, you were just a bartender over at the tavern.
Barmaid.
Yeah, so you're never going to be anything else, which is absolutely ridiculous. Jacob's middle son, Alexander, inherited the coal mining empire, but he didn't keep it because he seems to have gotten some form of mental illness and ended up in the Athens Asylum for the Insane in Athens, Ohio, which we have covered on a previous episode. Records from the asylum indicate that Alexander may have had epilepsy and had partial paralysis of one side of his body. He supposedly had some manic episodes, so I don't know if he might have been a little bipolar or what have you. Of course, there are a lot of places that play this up that he was perfectly sane until he lived in this house and then he went crazy,
Sure.
People, they have mental illness, and so after he was committed, his daughter Lyde took over the coal business. Lyde had also inherited the house, so she lived there with her younger brother, who was named Edwin. The siblings seemed to be very close, and Edwin was very upset when Lyde died in the house in the dining room. Because he was so close to her and she had died, he wanted to try to contact her again after she had died. He still wanted to talk to her. I can understand that. That's why a lot of people go to see psychics, And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
Edwin set out to study the occult, and he brought some mediums in the house to conduct seances. Psychics came from all over the country to see if they could help Edwin contact Lyde. Through these seances, it is thought that a portal was opened in the house, and there was even claims that multiple portals were open. Other members of the Heatherington family finally managed to kick Edwin out of the house, and they sold the house. Edwin died in 1962 at the age of 75. We're not sure of ownership of the house after that point until 2008. The current owner of the house, Kristen Lee, wrote the book Paranormal Confessions: True Stories of Hauntings, Possession, and Horror from the Bellaire House in 2021. She began her journey towards the house with the destruction of her home in Quincy, Ohio after Hurricanes Francis and Ivan. A FEMA grant helped her to relocate herself, her 2 sons, and their dog Bella to Bellaire, where she found the Bellaire House being sold under foreclosure. The price and size of the house was perfect. When Kristen saw it for herself, she was taken with its beauty and charm. She truly felt it was a dream to now own the house, but soon she would see it as a nightmare.
The haunting for her family started very simply with disembodied footsteps. While we usually just breeze over these accounts of footsteps coming from something unseen because, frankly, Kelly, they happen at almost every haunted location we talk about. So it's like disembodied footsteps, and then you move on to the next thing. It seems that these places that we've covered, like the witch house, which was supposed to be demonically infested as well, all start out with these basic disembodied steps. Like the spirits are quietly introducing themselves to disarm residents before unleashing more intense experiences. Kristen heard the steps coming from above her head when she was on the 2nd floor. It sounded like someone was walking in the attic, which is kind of a bummer for her to get this feeling that there's somebody in the attic because she loved the attic space when she saw it. It looked like a little hidey hole place that you could just go to get away from the world. She was the only person in the house. The steps stopped, and she tried to convince herself it was just the creaking of an old house, but then the steps started up again. I don't know that she was married to this man at the time. It might have been her ex-husband, and he was running a tattoo parlor out of the place, and it was supposed to be up in the attic, so she thought, well, maybe he's up there and I just don't know it. But then when he came home later on, she's like, were you home earlier and up there? And he's like, no, it wasn't me.
Shortly after that, Kristen was sleeping on a couch in the living room when she was startled awake. It took her a minute to orient herself, and then she realized that a figure was sitting at the end of the couch. This was a transparent man that she started calling the Gray Man because he looked as though he had stepped out of a black and white photo. She screamed this first time that she saw him. The Gray Man stood up and walked into the foyer and disappeared. Objects would regularly move around and things would go missing. Most of the activity in the house is on the 2nd floor, so Kristen became scared of the 2nd floor. She eventually moved most of their belongings, especially their clothes, to the 1st floor. The altar room, as it is known today, became their little sanctuary as Kristen felt it was the safest room in the house, and she had cast protection spells and circles around it.
Now, when I read that part, I went, wait, this isn't just some woman off the street who came into this house. If she's casting protection spells,
Right.
She knows a little thing or two here.
She figured she would let the spirits in the house have the 2nd floor and try to coexist, but that didn't work out. Kristen spent a night in the Edwin Heatherington room with her dog Bella. She awakened to see a terrifying entity. It appeared as a static electric black rain cloud in the room and caused the whole room to feel electrified. Kristen felt something force her backward, and then it held her down while Bella started going crazy, running around the room barking. Then something picked Bella up and threw her backward. Kristen and Bella ran from the room, and Kristen knew then that her family had to leave the house because now the spirits were attacking them. So she moved out. The year was 2009. And oh no, you didn't throw my dog.
Kelly,
oh, no,
I should have said it at the same time you did because I was about to go, oh no, you didn't. You pick my dog up and throw it. Oh, we're going to have a throw down.
Yep.
I'm going to whip out my Bible and my Jesus Christ, and you're getting the hell out of this house.
Cast you out in the name of Jesus.
Kristen left the house abandoned for a while, but local code enforcement told her that she needed to come back and take care of the house. Weeds are piling up. The house needs to be painted. Come on. At this point, Kristen had moved to Massachusetts, but she couldn't afford to completely lose the property, so she decided to start renting it out. No renters stayed very long. 1 year was the most any renter managed. The renters reported lots of strange activity, and one family had a chandelier fall that almost hit someone in the head. Another renter reported a full-on physical assault. Then there were no more renters, so Kristen needed to come up with another idea. Apparently, the news is getting out. You don't want to stay at that house. She decided to open the house up to paranormal investigators. And it seems that investigators have communicated with Lyde Heatherington, Edwin Heatherington, and several other entities that include the Gray Man and a child ghost who had belonged to a servant, and it's thought that the child fell from the attic, and the ghost of a young girl identified as Emily Davis who wears a white dress. Kristen has not only watched as Emily opened the door to her office and entered, but then watched as she went up to the attic. Kristen also had Emily come through a spirit box and say, "Hi, Kristen." Kristen asked what her name was and got Emily, and then after a minute, Davis. So that's where they got the name, and apparently she drowned in the nearby Ohio River. I don't know if she told them that over the spirit box or if they did some investigating and found this young girl named Emily Davis who had drowned. Kelly, for years, I would say I don't believe in child ghosts. I always said, nope, I believe it is somebody who is playing around and pretending to be a child ghost. And yes, then I met you, and then we started doing our own investigations, and I went, you know what? Yep, there are child spirits. I don't know why, but there definitely are. Until you get to this Emily, I think that this is exactly what I would have said a child ghost was back in the day. I think it's something
masquerading,
that is impersonating a child.
Edwin likes to be made part of the seances that are conducted in the house, and Kristen tells people to leave an empty chair at the table for Edwin. One group decided they didn't want to do that, and they put a doll in the chair. Kristen shares what happened next in her book. Edwin quickly made his displeasure known. The chandelier in the foyer started blinking, as if he were telling us that this is his house, and these are his rules. He wanted his seat back immediately. I walked into the seance room and asked the ladies again to leave a chair open for Edwin. When they refused a second time, a light bulb in the chandelier exploded. The group finally removed the doll from the chair and let Edwin have his seat. After that, all was well, although Edwin held a grudge against the group and warned me to stay away from them. I was happy to oblige.
The house has been featured on a variety of paranormal shows. Paranormal investigator John Zaffis says of the Bellaire House, "After spending a few nights at the Bellaire House and experiencing the spirits within its walls, I could say it's very haunted and still has a few secrets to share." Exorcist Bishop James Long said of the house, "I can tell you that Bellaire House is one of the most active haunted locations that I have ever investigated." Bishop Long has conducted a cleansing of the house. When he did his initial walkthrough, he definitely sensed an evil presence. He turned on a recorder and got the following EVPs: Bishop, Leave, Demon, Dark. Kristen claimed that the black cloud entity that she described earlier that was kind of electrified and everything was a demon, and that it was expelled from the house in 2015 when Bishop Long came. And yet, something still remains, supposedly. The entity that is in the attic is considered to be malevolent and seems to have control over the other spirits in the house. For this reason, people are told not to trust Emily if she comes through because the entity likes to use her to get information or to fool people. No one is sure that Emily really is a child spirit, and there definitely seems to be proof that nefarious energies in a haunted location have used the appearance of a child spirit to fool investigators.
Kristen shared this story in her book with an interaction that happened with Emily when Kristen was still living in the house with her 2 boys. When I was still living at Bellaire House, some neighborhood kids came over to play video games with my son. You can only imagine my shock and horror when I saw them climbing out onto the roof through a bedroom window. I quickly nipped that plan in the bud. After I closed and locked the window, I asked them what had ever given them the idea to climb out onto the roof. They told me that a little girl in a white dress had told them to go onto the roof and play. After I sent the children home, I confronted Emily to find out if this story were true. The entity didn't like it when I refused to abandon my line of questioning. When challenged, Emily behaves like a bratty child who isn't getting her own way, or like a slippery snake slithering deeper into the underworld energies.
Or like a serpent?
Possibly. In a spiritual battle, she becomes sinister, cold, and dead, and shows no mercy. Unlike typical malign entities, Emily feeds on sadness rather than fear in order to stay charged. I've personally found that the energy level of anyone engaging with her is very low.
Jim Backus is a paranormal investigator that joined Kristen and several guests for a special Valentine's Day seance. He sat on the back porch with Kristen for a bit before the festivities began, and he couldn't get over the feeling that something was watching them from the nearby woods. Kristen suggested it could be a coyote, but Jim felt it was human-sized. He remarked that he thought it could be either a French soldier or a Native American spirit. And both are possibilities, as some of the French and Indian War took place in this area. The group later got lots of activity with REM pods going off and on when asked. A girl who was part of the group named Allison had her shoe pulled off by something they couldn't see.
During another investigation in the house, a group was down in the basement when they heard the cracking of a whip. Several investigators then felt a gust of air go past them, and another investigator cried out that something felt like it whipped her leg. Kristen definitely emphasizes how dark the force is in the house, and that it feeds off of anger, fear, and sadness. So this makes us ask, why would you allow people into a house that could be so dangerous? And this is what causes our skeptical minds to doubt some of these stories. When something is over the top, it's just hard to believe. We read a newspaper article from the Akron Beacon Journal written in 2021 by Hannah Calalay. She and her group spent the night in the house and were able to sleep peacefully and didn't collect any evidence. She admits in the article that despite investigating several haunted locations, that she has never experienced anything paranormal and doesn't think that ghosts are real. Is that why nothing happened? Are investigations really mostly about what people take in with them? That is something that we ponder often.
But there have been hundreds of teams that have visited the house and gotten plenty of evidence. There are claims that some spirits have been crossed over, which is something I don't think you believe. I know I don't believe that it's possible for us to be crossing spirits over. But if that were the case, why don't the portals close here? And why don't the spirits leave? This is never explained as more and more extravagant stories about the house are told. Kristen has claimed that people have contacted entities called the Star People and the Secrets of Ormus Earthbound Spirits. Maybe this poor house has just had too many people coming through, opening things up without closing anything. Maybe Bellaire House has become a way station for spirits on their journey. We probably will never know. Is Bellaire House haunted? That is for you to decide. And of course, there's countless videos on YouTube that you can watch. We, as a matter of fact, just watched a clip of Sam and Colby, 12 million views of them running around screaming and, oh my gosh. And Kelly's telling me to be nice. I'm not being mean. I'm just saying this is what sells for people. And I'm like, this woman, I don't know what happened with this house. Maybe there were some things in there that did scare her. And this is her way to make back the money on that investment because she can't sell it. Or maybe it's a house that's fallen apart that she doesn't have the money to fix. I don't know. I just find it suspect when somebody comes in and acts like they were unsuspecting about this house, and now they're this psychic medium who's a paranormal expert and writing books and charging people to come into this horribly dangerous house.
Well, kind of like Velisca, when we went and investigated there, there's been so many TV shows about the evil entity that's there and so forth, and we didn't find anything
go in there
evil.
And it's like, it's a really small house, and the energy did not feel bad to us.
No.
And as we said,
and we did have interactions.
A lot of it
weren't negative.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with what you're bringing in. So are these people bringing in all kinds of crazy energy because they're expecting it to be a demonic house like the Conjuring house? You know, and the sad thing about it is you never get to what the real story is. I believe that the parents who lived in the Conjuring house had something happen to them. I don't know what, but we'll never know because the stories just keep ballooning up and getting bigger and bigger and all this other stuff. And you don't know what the truth is. So I don't know what the truth is of this house. I would be interested for us to go in there and give it a whirl. see what we come up with. I bet we get a lot different energy in there than some of these other people do, because we would just be going in there and going, I just want to talk to somebody and figure out what's going on.
Right.
Anywho, what is possible is for you to go through a portal that takes you over to our website, historygoesbump.com.
Queen of the segues.
And if you would like to send us some feedback, maybe you don't like anything that we've said on this show and you're like, that Bellaire House is demonic.
Tell us about your experiences.
Yes, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com or make comments on any of our social media out there. And if you're not following us on our social media, please do so. Subscribe to our YouTube and all that good jazz, and hit the like buttons on everything. Because sometimes I know it's a lot to get you guys to have the time to write a review, or some of the places that you listen don't allow to do reviews. But if there's a like button or something, or a heart or what have you, please smash that for us.
Yeah, smash it. Just don't break your phone or whatnot.
And we did get a couple of comments over on YouTube. Under way back on episode 25, long time ago, this is the Rockwood Mansion. Queen Kelly Marie 2556 said, thank you for this information. I've just uncovered that my Harkins ancestors were working here in 1860 until at least 1870. My third great-grandparents straight from Ireland.
How cool.
Yeah, I was like, that's so cool. So her great-great-great-grandparents had worked at the Rockwood Mansion. And then one Eddie Cat wrote under episode 355, this is Four Paws Restaurant. Four Paws was our favorite restaurant to go to for special occasions for 30 years. My husband and I would go every Christmas, Valentine's Day, and for our anniversary or special get-togethers when family or friends were in town. It was always crowded. The bar was a comfortable place to wait for your table or for a drink with friends. It was absolutely beautifully decorated for the holidays. Their signature dish for special occasions was the fabulous beef Wellington. I could always feel a peculiar energy in the house the instant I stepped in the door, like a low buzz or hum. In different areas, particularly the stairs and the upper floor dining room, the air had that feeling like you get after a lightning strike that hits close to you.
Oh.
Tingling. And I would hope a lot of people don't know what that's like to have a lightning strike close to you.
Well.
Or hit your house. We kind of know what that's like. Upper dining room was always freezing cold. It is reopening and we are thrilled. There's no place better than this for celebrations. There's also supposed to be a little boy. One time in the early 1990s, we were there for Valentine's Day. Our candle would never stay lit. It was kind of funny. The waiter would relight it, start to walk away, and puff, it was out. He tried several times. We hadn't known it was supposed to be haunted until that day when the waiter told us about it. So he's probably like,
how fun.
I'm sorry, I can't keep that candle lit. Somebody keeps blowing it out. We have spirits.
Very cute.
So thanks for sharing those. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now.
Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
Dispatches from the Grave Digger.
And we want to thank Grant, who's also known as Pac-Man Impact Site, for raising his support. We're going to be moving you into a garden crypt, and in 3 months, you're going to get your HGB logo mug.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you supporting our show.
Check out the website at historygoesbump.com.
After that, all was well. Although Eldwin.
Kristen left the house abandoned for a while, but local code enforcement. It was cord enforcement, but local cord. Now I did it on purpose. See what you did to me, Kelly.
It's all my fault.